دانش مسیر ثروت.
Hello everyone and welcome to today's session. Whether you're trading your first lot or managing a growing portfolio, there's one truth that eventually becomes unavoidable in this business. It's not the strategy that fails, it's the mindset. And today we have the privilege of exploring that mindset with one of the most respected voices in the field of trading psychology. It's truly a great honor to be joined by Rande Howell, someone whose work has shaped the way countless traders understand their emotion and emotional relationship with risk and performance. Rande isn't just a coach. He brings the depth of a licensed therapist, the clarity of a neuroscience-informed educator, and the wisdom of years spent helping traders confront what's really standing between them and consistency. Today, we are going beyond surface level advice. And if you've ever hesitated on a great setup, exited too early, or stayed in too long trying to prove something, this conversation is for you. Let's get it started. Hello, Mr. Howell. It's an absolute honor to have you here. I'm very excited for this great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm equally excited to be here.
Thank you so much. So I have been following your work, both written and also your YouTube video. But for those of our viewers who are less familiar with your work, I think it would be a great start to this conversation. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And can you tell us how you got from the world of psychology into the world of trading?
Well, I was trying to find a way to escape from being a therapist. It's here in the United States, managed care has made it really difficult to actually make enough money as a therapist to meet my dreams. And so I had started developing more of a human potential self-development regimen and stuff like that. And I was doing a retreat, and I did my piece at the retreat, and a guy came up to me afterwards and said, "I understand you're a performance coach. I was really impressed what you did." And he said, "Well, I'm having some performance issues in my work, and I was wondering if you might be able to help me." And I said, "Sure. What's your business?" And he says, "I'm a hedge fund manager." And I looked at him. This is 18 years ago. Okay, what's a hedge fund manager? And at any rate, from there, what happened is that as I worked with him, he started referring people to me, and I started discovering I really liked working with traders a lot more than I did with clinical stuff. Okay. And eventually I was able to really iron it down to what I like about working with traders is I have a bunch of guinea pigs with traders that really help me see the brain on uncertainty. And for me, that is fascinating. And traders, once they recognize that the brain they brought to trading is not going to work in trading, and they're going to have to reshape it and rebuild it, it's just, it's just really fun to see a person start taking tools and start reshaping the habits that have led the invention of their life. It's just, I could not be more fortunate to be in this field and working this way with a group of people. Really not, but that's how I actually got into this field.
Oh, that's great. I'm so glad that that encounter has somehow shifted the way that you approached, being a psychologist and also working in the financial markets. And I'm very excited to hear your thoughts and opinions about whatever that goes on in the world of psychology. Now, something that I have always been curious about is the mindset that we all have, not just me as a market analyst, but a lot of traders as well. We think that winning is being able to forecasting the next move, the next candle, the next rate decision, the next time Powell speaks, what he's going to talk about. But, we know that it's sometimes out of our hands. And you have said that before, that you cannot control the outcome of the trade, but you can control the mind. What do you actually mean by controlling the mind, and how can we control our mind and the way that our brain works when we're trading?
That's that's a more nuanced question, but I will give you a more nuanced answer. Is your brain, what we call this mind, this neocortex, is actually something that's occurred recently, within the last 10 million years. Okay? By evolution, that's very recent. And it grew out of the emotional brain, which I also call the caveman brain. Okay, and it's also known as the mammalian brain. We are at the heart of it. We may look really spiffy today, but we are social mammalians. And most of that work is about how groups can become cohesive to survive in the environment. And so ultimately what happens is that brain is really, it wants to survive in the moment. And in particular, the big link between that survival business and trading is that the caveman brain has no concept of what money is. Oh. If we took a boatload of paper money, dumped it in front of a group of cave people, they would be very befuddled. They might use it as like start
Rightfully
fires.
So.
Yeah. At the same time, though, in modern life, the invention of money, suddenly your ability to survive, which is the capital of evolution, okay, and the adaptation, suddenly when you take a loss, that's just not a loss of paper. That's not a loss of money. It is, to the caveman brain, that loss represents being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger and being threatened biologically to your very existence. Now, under those circumstances, would you fight to your last breath? Absolutely. In trading, we call that revenge trading. And again, it's that ancient brain of ours, our mammalian brain, that nobody clued it in on it with an email. Nobody ever told anybody about it. So it sits there, it sees that thing going against you, and it sees the saber-toothed tiger stalking toward you. And then it pounces when you really take a hard loss, and all of a sudden you want that money back. That's 6 million years old. And saber-toothed tigers were still in existence 12,000 years ago. Okay, so you're looking at it and going, yeah, I can understand how I did that. But how do you go about taking that caveman brain, that mammalian brain, and working with it to be able to survive in a world where you do not control outcome, where what you control is the mind that you bring into the moment? The caveman brain's not going to work. And it just so happens, it will even lie to itself. It wants control to the point where it will lie to itself and convince you, this thinking mind, just thinking it's in control, that it has control when it doesn't. So the ability to actually go in and retrain something from its ancient origins to apply it to this world that was never created it's really a miracle. It's just like, golly, it's fascinating, but it can be done.
Okay. That's great. Thank you so much. That's a great answer. I actually wanted to ask you about the caveman brain, but thank you so much for explaining that for us. Another somehow phrase that you have used in your work before is emotional hijacking. I mean, many of us believe that in order to succeed in the world of trading, maybe not by ourselves, but by the teaching of many people, is to just omit emotions or not have any types of emotions or be like a robot. But you have used the word emotional hijacking before in your work. Can you tell us what that means in a trading session and what that does to us when we are somehow placing a trade, and how can we recognize emotional hijacking?
It's funny, I was writing an article about that very thing just moments before we talked. First of all, the idea that you can not have emotions, the only time that you do not have emotions is when you're dead. Okay? And we don't wish that on you. Okay? But the thing is what happens if you begin to reframe what you understand an emotion to be. In neurobiology, an emotion is considered to be a biological action potential. It's not psychological. It's biological. And what happens is that it needs to react within nanoseconds, and it's independent of thought. It will color thought, okay? But so the very first basis is that you have to recognize that it's a biological action potential that is coordinating action between the environment, what we would call the markets, and the trader, what we would call the organism. So anytime that there's a change in status, there automatically is going to be an emotion that fires. That's the way we're wired emotionally for that to happen. The question is, what emotions are firing, and particularly when we're facing uncertainty and we're risking capital, value, our lives, what emotions are firing? Our survival instincts are going to fire fight, flight when there is danger, okay, or opportunity. And at the same time, those are rapid, and at the same, you can sit there and you can see something that you say, something, okay, that setup is okay, it's arisen, okay, and I need confirmation. And then what happens is you start thinking, oh my God, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong?
Exactly.
And all of a sudden, no amount of confirmation is going to be enough until the trade gets away. That's a hijacking. When that trade first appeared, there was an automatic response to the change in status. And without a trained mind, your likelihood is to either look at that going, that can be danger. I need a lot of confirmation before I get in. Or you might look at that as opportunity. To our caveman ancestors, 8 guys attacking a woolly mammoth doesn't seem like a good idea. There's going to be some injuries involved in that. At the same time, it was so highly rewarded that they got leadership. They had first dibs on being able to breed their genes into the future. There's lots of stuff. So it wired in as it's kind of like, it's not 30-year-old men who go into the military. It's guys who are 17, 18 years old who do not believe that they can die that go into the military. And it's the same thing here, is you have to look at it and go, I'm going to have to train the responses that are different. Like you can train, you can easily train when something flares up. You can actually train yourself to act from a position of discipline, of patience, and clarity. It takes work, but you can actually override the emotional impulse. But until then, when the emotion first fires, it goes through a period of emotional arousal where it's cranking up. It's getting ready for action. And then what happens is there is this moment where it's beginning to crack, and the emotion also has something called motivation. What direction is that emotion telling you to work in? And that's where you get a lot of the overtrading. That's where you get the revenge trading. And it's gone wild, but it's programmed for success at another time and another place. But trading is just a completely different thing. So these things are happening automatically. Okay. It's not like it builds up, it builds up, it builds up. No, it fires.
Yeah.
And we don't understand that we are not rational human beings. We are emotional beings who rationalize. And if you begin to grasp that, you go, yeah, the more rational you sound, most likely is the more you're deluding yourself. And what happens in trading, you are forced to deal with that. Reason is good for analysis, but it's not necessarily good for action. No, you've got to have emotional discipline. You have to produce patience in order for that reason to show up and actually do its job. And most people, when you see a hijacking, this what I actually call the orphan. It's that reactive self that is developed into an environment. Your brain, my brain, it is remarkably undeveloped compared to other social mammalians at birth. And it actually takes another 9 months for the human infant to catch up with the chimpanzee when born at the same time. Yeah. And there's only 2% genetic difference between us also. And you're going, oh, but we don't have nearly as much architecture that is just survival instinct. What happens is we actually live wire. We actually adapt ourselves in the environment from the birth. I mean, when the baby comes out, and what happens, this is in America, they used to do something really incredibly stupid. They would separate mother and child. And later they found out that there were attachment issues. Then they finally figured out that no, when that baby comes out, you plug that baby right on the chest and you let them make eye contact, and attachment is formed. And all of a sudden you get a healthier baby and all that kind of stuff. So see, you can even learn all sorts of things other than just trading, but it's the hijacking, because there is a change in status, and suddenly the change in status produces ambiguity. And the ambiguity is something our brain is enormously scared of. It is very uncomfortable, and it will jump in to do anything to get out of the ambiguity. And therein lies the problem.
That's
Very
great.
very few people figure that out.
That's fascinating. Such a great answer. I have never thought of the world of trading the way that you have described it. Thank you so much. Now, you talked a little bit about different types of emotions and different types of traits that can help us being active in the financial market. And you mentioned discipline. Now, we know discipline and courage and these types of, personality traits are really helpful developing the mindset of a successful trader. But in your opinion, what are some other personal traits that are undervalued and we don't think about them as a key factor of a successful trader?
I think one of the biggest things is actually the beliefs that are embedded at the bottom of the emotion that define how we see uncertainty. I don't have a business if it weren't for a bunch of guys somewhere in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. If they were not still trying to prove to a father, probably dead by now, that he has the stuff,
He's worthy.
He's worthy. Yeah. And I used to believe it was American families, but as I now work internationally, I've discovered no, it's the whole human race.
Everywhere.
Okay? Yep, it's everywhere. And what you rarely see is a father shaping how that masculinity is going to show up. I grew up in a military family, and my father was a retired colonel, and it was his road or the road. And so what I discovered is an emerging ruler, that discipline simply didn't have a place to be in that environment. And so that it became pushed out, that part of me. And only years later did I actually go, oh my gosh, I have to reinvite this part of myself and develop it and nurture it so that it becomes a working part of my mind. And so the beliefs about our mattering, like if you see an alpha and he blows up not just an account, but he blows up net worth in the process, the alpha wants to win to be able to prove himself that he matters. Okay. And it can work. It can work in a lot of different arenas, but in trading, no, that just won't, that's just not going to work. And the same thing with worth is that we often have our net worth and what I call inherent worth plugged together. We're performance driven, and we are about how big our house is, blah 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 blah. And it's not true. I have a friend who has made somewhere between $200 and $300 billion in the last several years as a trader. And when I see a guy like that, I'm very curious about what makes him tick. And I asked him, and he says, oh, I can tell you exactly when it happened. He said, back when $750,000 were really a lot of money to me, I lost that in a day because I just made some stupid mistakes and compounded it by trying to cover up the mistakes and all that stuff. And the truth is I still lost $750,000, and my wife came home. all in me wanted to lie to her and tell her things and all that stuff. But what I did is I confessed to her, and I expected her to yell and scream and stuff like that. But what happened instead, she came and she held me, and we cried for 15 minutes together. And out of that, he said to me, he says, Randy, that's when I discovered that come win or lose, I'm loved. I'm going to be okay. And so you see a big, powerful belief that's been exposed and readjusted that allows him to go on a level of performance that he had never experienced before. And that's how he became this trader who gets all talked about and stuff like that. But it's those beliefs and about our adequacy. Okay. And you start looking at it, and everybody's going in trying to prove their adequacy, their worth, their mattering, their lovableness. And they're looking at the wrong thing. The trading gods are pretty fickle about that stuff. You know, they you can't control outcomes, so you can't repeat something that makes you feel good. All that. So you're actually having to come in at the very bottom. And this is the cool thing about trading, is that who would have thought that trading becomes one of the greatest avenues of self-mastery the world's ever known, because it forces you to find an inherent worthiness so that you can separate performances from your worth as a human being.
That's great. Such a great answer. So not only your emotions, but the beliefs that drive every move that you make is the core of what basically decides whether you will become successful, not in trading basically, but in any field of your career. Thank you so much. Now, since we're talking about emotions, and this is something that a lot of our traders, not only the ones that use eplanet brokers, but a lot of people from Persian-speaking communities focus on whenever they're talking about the psychology of trading, is the fear and also the greed. I think we talked about greed a little bit as you were talking about revenge trading and stuff like that. But fear is the word that just is thrown into the trading conversation a lot. Now, something that happens to me sometimes, because I trade just very little, but for those few times that I trade, maybe in a month, I can feel something, but I don't know. I make some decisions, but I don't know whether they're charged with fear or any type of other emotions. How can I understand that an action that I make is charged with fear or any type of emotion? And how can I don't want to say somehow omit it. How can I run with it, use that fear to create something, do something better with my trade or anything else that I'm doing?
Yeah. Well, one of the best ways that I use is there's an element of an emotion called emotional motivation. That's what the emotion is telling you to do. And like, for instance, fear and anxiety. You know, fear is an emotion of immediate endangerment to your biological existence. Like a guy pulls a gun on you, or a saber-tooth cat comes after you. And what happened, it is gut-wrenching. If you take a look at anxiety is really foreboding about the future. They're very completely different emotions. They have a similarity in that they tend to be based on avoidance and the chemistry in the body. But the main thing is you're looking at avoidance. And if you know, oh, I'm trying to avoid, that's going to be fear or anxiety that is driving it. Now, what's at the bottom of the anxiety? That's what, whether or not you're speaking Farsi or English or whatever, is you're still going to have to get to the bottom of the fear and recognize is that fear has been intimidating you, and that the only power that it has is the power that you give it.
Great answer.
You have to learn to say, you have to find the courage. You also have to come to the moment of where you recognize that we all inherently, and no matter how you frame it, I use the term children of creation. Okay. And so happens the creation that I see uses the Big Bang. Okay. And at the same time, I meet people of various spiritual paths, and they have a way of using their own traditions to go at and find that inherent work. But either way you do it, that's the piece you got to get to.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now, another question that I've had, and I think you have mentioned this in your work, and also I've heard it from many other performance coaches, is that in trading, you have to believe like you're some sort of an athlete, because we expect somebody like Lionel Messi to always try to warm up for a match or always have different practice sessions before an actual match. But I don't know why in the realm of trading, we don't have that mindset. We think that once we read this line and understand the basis of technical analysis or fundamental analysis, then we know everything. But you have talked about preparing like an athlete, like a trading warm-up. In your opinion, what is a trade? How does it work, a trading warm-up? And how can we just get ourselves ready for each trading session or trading day?
There is a wonderful cartoon by Disney Pixar called Inside Out. It's about 10, 12, 13 years old. And what you're looking at is a movie about a little girl, and inside you're seeing the emotional programs drive the little girl's behavior and perception and stuff like that. What happens is they actually went to neuropsychologists, and this is how they map the way emotions actually act as thoughts in your head and the control panel and all 9 yards, giving rise to the thinking and beliefs and perception of the little girl. If you begin to recognize that your brain is a community of rival emotional programs that are duking it out for control, whoever's in control takes over the mind, and it goes that way. Okay. The mind is a space of where those emotional programs are given voice. And so what happens is whether or not you like to admit it or not, there is a lot running around in your brain all the time. And people look at me and say, "Are you telling me crazy?" And I'm saying, no, you're crazy if you don't recognize there are competing forces in your head. And if you don't pay attention to it, you're going to run into a brick wall, and particularly in trading. So if you take that notion and you're realizing that, oh, this is no longer just emotional programs. These are parts of the self that, and I understand that there are no action figures running around in your head, but there are specialized forces. The brain is highly competitive. Real estate's everything. They're actually able to take that competitiveness and like strokes and actually get other parts of the brain to do brain function that has been injured. But you're looking at it and going, what mind do I want to be present as I engage the challenges of my day or trading? And my promise to you, it's not going to be the one you came stock with. Okay. If you take a look at a guy like LeBron James, the great basketball player, he has an extensive process that allows him to get in the mindset to be LeBron James when he's playing basketball. It's no accident. Okay. And in the same way is that it's easy for us to have that negativity, what I call the inner critic, the one that's saying, "Oh, you're not going to make it." You're really negative. And this, what I call this orphan nature, that fear, okay, or I want to prove myself, for them to be dominant. Most people wake up in my work and go, "Randy, I have been living from my orphan nature my entire life, and I had no idea." And so what I'm asking people to do is say, trading is one of the most difficult cognitive activities you could ever ask a human brain to do. And what happens is that it needs for you to sit there and say, what mind do I want to engage this particular moment? And so I'm a big fan of developing what I call empowered archetypes, the empowered emotional programs, to be present when you engage it, because otherwise your brain is not going to, it's not going to want the uncertainty of ambiguity. It's not going to want it. It's going to construct another brain to interact with that, not necessarily the one that you need to have an edge in your trading. So I'm looking for, how do you organize that mind to put your best self in a position to take advantage of whatever the markets are going to give you?
Thank you so much. It's so fascinating that you put trading as one of the most difficult cognitive activities. And unfortunately, in Iran, in Persian-speaking communities, it is advertised as one of the easiest ways to just get to like huge profits and just make your life so much better. I think a lot of people should watch this interview and take notes and understand how different it is as it is advertised and as you have rightfully described it for us. But I have a question, a curiosity that a lot of people have. People even from my own friends and family. Some people are naturally resilient. I mean, they are naturally people who adapt to change very easily, or they have like high tolerance of risk. But there are some people who are very difficult to change. Do you think some people are simply not cut to be in the world of financial markets based on their psychology? Or do you think anyone, if they put their mind into it and just follow the advice of people such as yourself, can be successful in the world of trading and financial markets?
My own personal belief is that there is a point where you have to recognize that your brain is just not going to do what you're asking it to do. I worked with a guy a couple years ago who is one of the most successful serial entrepreneurs that I have ever met in my life. And one day he and his partners sold a distribution center for cash. So they had a lot of cash on hand. Okay. And about that time, the guy's name's Matt. He talks to his brother, Steve, and Steve's a trader. And what Matt discovers is that, trading is a capital intensive business. And he says, well, I have a lot of capital. And so he went in and says, I'm just going to learn the business. I mean, this guy's proven he can learn business systems, and before he knows, he's turned the business and makes 5 or 10 times more than he paid for. Okay. All I'm going to do is learn that. And 5 years later, he was trying to get back to profitability. This is a guy who had never known anything but success in business. Okay. And so he's looking at that, and finally he ends up on my doorstep, and he comes to a moment where he actually becomes consistently profitable. Okay. And one day he's sitting just like you and I are talking right now, and he says, Randy, I want to thank you. This is the best money I've ever spent in my life. I recognize now what it takes to become a trader, and I'm not willing to give up control. I'm really good at control. And, 10 years, if you'd asked me that question, I'd probably said everybody. I was talking to a really good trader about this, just kind of like trying to get my handle on it. And he says, Randy, it's just a crying shame that you take a perfectly good entrepreneurial mind and try to make it a trading mind. Made all the sense in the world. It's not as if Matt couldn't do it. He proved he could do it. But the thing is that was not the route of his happiness. That's not what made him who he was. And he didn't want to become that human being. So I would say you really need to find if trading is what you're willing to give your soul to, because to revamp the brain that you bring from our ancient past to a brain that can work emotionally in trading, you're going to have to do some wholesale reordering of the mind. And you have to decide whether or not you're willing to do that. And if you're willing to stare down your, stare down the monsters that live inside you and to not conquer them like plunging them to death, but to master them. That's what's going to have to happen. And if you're not willing to do that, you really need to find a different trade other than trading, because, you know, I would say it could be it's a terrible waste of an alpha's energy. So it's not like you haven't got the goods. I'm saying the amount of change that you're going to have to produce, is it consistent with the human being you want to be?
That's a great answer. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you mentioned somehow a personal story about how an interaction with people who have come to you for help somehow changed the way that you see things. I also wanted to ask you this question. Have you ever had a client or someone who came to you who was so challenging that somehow completely changed your framework or see the way that you see somehow the financial markets? Because as for me, I remember I used to be an English teacher, and I remember I had this particular student, dealing with that student was so difficult for me that I completely did a 180 after that term finished with that student. I had to completely change the way that I thought or saw the students. I want to see if you had the similar experience as mine.
You know, a lot. I get a lot of people who come to me and they get through. We actually do a good bit of screening before a person actually talks to me, because what we want to do is we want to get rid of the people who basically are looking for me to give them words of wisdom that they're just going to put inside their head and it's going to change life. You know, that may work in electronics where you actually have wires, but we have organic substrate in us. We're animals, and particularly in neural processes, it takes a lot of effort to change that stuff. I had one just quite recently where it just simply wasn't going fair. He flat faced me for about 2 months, and we were doing particular work, and he's also Swiss, so it could tell you they're kind of rigid people often. And what happens is that it wasn't necessarily me that did it, but his girlfriend said, "You know something, don't you remember?" And it's just how it happens. How do you relate to this scared part of the self? And I call that scared part of the self the orphan. Okay. And he said, "You know something that's really interesting. The one thing I never told Randy is that when I was a kid, I had a nickname, and that's what they called me." And I started talking to myself from that perspective. And that part of me, that orphan part of me, calmed down. But up until that, I was just looking at going, what am I supposed to do here? He's malingering. He's doing a lot of different things that isn't showing me he's actively interested. And then it just clicked, and there he is. So yeah, it happens. But I do find a lot of people get into trading. They have no idea what they're getting into, and they are not up to the task of the kind of reconstruction of the self that's required to become successful. I do see that a lot.
So, Mr. Howell, I want to ask you a question about the world of AI. I mean, AI is reshaping everything, including the world of finance. When you imagine a trader in the world 2050, for example, they are shaped by AI, they are shaped by new markets and also neuroscience. Do you think then the psychology of a trader actually would matter, or the advanced AI or developed AI can also solve any type of psychological problem that we might have when we are active in the financial markets?
Well, there are people with pay grades much higher than me actually looking at that problem right now themselves. What I did read this morning was that AI, they were developing AI as therapy. Okay. In the United States, they don't really have enough mental health practitioners because they don't pay them enough money. And now they're developing AI in order to engage with people. And what they're discovering is that the working relationship between a therapist and a client is based on the trust that the client has for the therapist. And what they're now doing is measuring deep levels of trust that the humans have for the AI. Okay? And that just, there's just something that just doesn't work at all within me about that. What's going to happen, and I fundamentally, at the very core, is that we humans have deep set beliefs that no matter how you spin it up, you still have to work with those, and some of them are not, some of them are evolutionary in their psychology that have become traits, you know, the fear response. I was walking my dog last night, and I live in a very rural area. And I'm walking down the road with my dog, and I hear something in the woods at night, dark, and bristling goes up and down my back. It just stands on head. That's a startle response. And it's like, oh my God, is there danger out there? What I know now is that that actually is a deer, which is not dangerous to me. But if I was living 40, 50,000 years ago, that could either be wolves, that could be all sorts of critters, bears, that would want to taste me as a morsel. They're so instinctual that, except for the people who really want to dig down and actually become captains of their own destiny, that will never be available to AI. And getting at that, and it's interesting, is I do a lot of writing, and I don't want AI doing any of my writing. All this stuff you hear coming out of me is that I just don't want AI to do that. I feel this is a gift that I've been given, and I'm using it the best I can. And interestingly, is my daughter just went to another job, and one of the things is that she had used her resume and gave it to the people and stuff like that. And they called her back and says, one of the reasons that we're calling you back is because this is not an AI generated resume.
Wow.
So we actually got the sense this is a human being behind that. So I think you're going to find some discernment, that you're still going to look for the human beneath all that. And you still have to build trust. You still have to find a way of getting that and improving it yourself, rather than having something outside of the self try to change you. Because, you know, this is, in trading, you really know it. Here's where the problem's at. And I don't see AI changing that. I see only human beings deciding to change that, being able to change that. That would be my prediction. And in several years, let's review that and see what happens.
Thank you so much. This session has been extremely enlightening for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people who will be watching us. Now, if you could just tell one sentence to every trader right before they placed a trade, what would it be?
This shall pass. No matter what happens, is the emotions don't know that there's a future. Okay? And so they act right now as if there's only one eternal moment. At the same time, what happens is, if you, and it's actually something, another common phrase is, we've got this.
We've got this. Just
having a community sense of the brain, and recognizing that there are going to be scared parts, there are going to be brave parts. And as you get these together, is it comes to the moment of where we know the strategy. We know that if we stay in that strategy, the edge will be there, extracting more capital out of the markets than you put back in. And what happens the moment that we change that, we're gambling. We're no longer a trader, we're a gambler. And so if you're going in, you're looking at it, the moment's about to occur, and as a consensus of all your little sub-personalities come together and say, we've got this.
We've got this.
That would be, however that translates into Farsi. That.
Let me think. I can't think of the exact wording of we've got this. Maybe همه چی اوکیه, okay میشه, something like this.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. That was such a great answer. Now, for the final part of this conversation, where can our audiences find you? And please do tell us about your upcoming projects.
Okay. Well, probably the easiest way to find me is on YouTube. Rande Howell, Rande Howell. I've got well over 300 videos up there, and people use them as education. They do all weekend Rande Howlers listen to this, and they play them while they're trading. Some people say that my voice calms them down, and I'm going, I think that's way too much Rande Howell, but that's another thing. The next one would be Trader State of Mind. That's my website, and that's where, like, and if you've never seen this, don't know anything about me, just get my free ebook. You know, it's something that will start exposing you to what in the world is this guy talking about, to where you start going, no, this is science, and he's added Jungian archetypal structure behind it. But that would be the main thing. And there's lots of there's articles there, there's all sorts of stuff, and there's also it starts getting, you know, you can also start purchasing things, and you discover that ultimately there's a group course and there's an individual course with me, and it kind of works that way. But most people spend hours on the YouTube channel.
Yeah,
that would be the
like
place.
And
I'm sorry that you missed it, but I was actually the Andrew Aziz, his Bear Bull Traders had a conference in Vancouver this past weekend, and I was actually one of the keynote speakers. And I that would be a good place if you want to see me talk and actually see me talk. I did a TEDx talk there, which I don't know if you guys know what TEDx is. It's
no, we might not be familiar.
Yeah. In a lot of the world, it's a place where those are the thought leaders of the world get together and talk about really powerful new ideas and things like that. And they wanted me to speak, so sure, you know. And I don't know when that's going to be available, but that would be one where I'm actually talking about the adversity that my wife and I experienced with. I went to China on a 2-week tour of talking and teaching and stuff like that.
Wow.
And I came out of it enormously sick. The pollution in Beijing in particular was so catastrophic to my body that within a year I had a pacemaker. 2 years I was in full heart failure. And then I proceeded to heart transplant.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Well, yes and no. What I'll say is that I sure wouldn't, I would not recommend it. And if it came knocking on the door again, I would try to run from it. But it was actually one of the most powerful experiences of my life. I lived, and which was in great dispute at one time. But it just so happens that when I spoke at Andrew's thing, that was the first time I had spoken in public in 7 years.
Wow. I hope that you give more public speeches, and I hope that one day I could meet you up close. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad that you're healthy and you provide us with all this great knowledge for free on your YouTube channel. All the links will be in the description so that people can find you easily. Yeah. Thank you so much. Are there any things that you would like to share with us, or we can wrap up this session?
Oh, we can wrap it up, but just understand this. Ultimately, this is all about just developing the self, developing your potential as a human being, and becoming a better version of yourself. and it's just sitting there waiting for you. And you've picked on a avenue through trading that is going to force the issue. And enjoy the ride.
We will. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great day and a great week ahead of you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
دانش مسیر ثروت.